Hey guys, and welcome to my final review of Borderlands 4. I've been pretty much no-lifing the heck out of this game for the past 10 or 11 days at this point. I pretty much reached the end game with multiple Vault Hunters, and I have a lot of things to say about Gearbox's latest installment in the franchise. A lot of this is going to be positive, some of it was so and so for me, and there are some negatives I'm also going to mention, as obviously this is not going to be the perfect game. That being said, it may not be the perfect game, but man, is it a blast to play, and gameplay is definitely one of the aspects that they really nailed. Now, it still feels like Borderlands, mind you, but with a few cool additions, and I will just have to say that the combination between jetpacks, air dashes, and grappling hooks just make the gameplay so much fun, to the point that it entices you to seek combat, to seek challenges because of the bunny hopping, just going across the map really quickly and pulling off cool trick shots, just some of the stuff that you can do with these combinations. And yeah, the maps and the environments definitely support that. And you can even use this strategically, mind you. If there is a particularly difficult boss that maybe is strong on the ground level, you may seek a vantage point or even linger in the air for a little bit, get a bit of respite, but also squeeze in a few more hits over there if that's something that you want to do. So these are just some of the possibilities. It's both a fun and a strategic element of the combat that really elevates that gameplay to the next level. Speaking of which, another aspect that really elevated the gameplay for me, and the loot chase for that matter too, is the new licensing part system, which can give you some crazy combinations. And I'll have to give my props, this was an ingenious way for them to utilize something that has always been there. All of these manufacture parts, which give unique effects, can now work in tandem, as there's a chance for pretty much every weapon in the game to spawn with multiple of these parts, which, as you would imagine, when combined can give you some crazy results, turning even the most mediocre weapon that may have previously been useless. Basically, there were many legendaries in some of the previous Borderlands games that just had the legendary status but not the damage or the functionality for it, but now they can become absolutely busted because of a few extra, in this case, parts on them that get licensed, giving you just the extra effect you needed to turn that into something amazing. There are so many billions of possible combinations here that I'm not even sure how Gearbox can even balance all of that, but honestly, I don't really care. It constantly felt fun, and just to give you a few examples, you can get weapons with Jacob's Ricochet now, so maybe you got a very busted weapon before, but that weapon can now also ricochet its projectiles, so as you would imagine, now it becomes a whole new way of messing with the game. And that's just one of the examples. There were many like these, and there's also an enhancement system that further enhances that on top, providing even more benefits to the part licensing system for that specific manufacturer. So the mixing and matching possibilities here is on a whole different level, to the point that now you have an even bigger incentive to chase that loot. Even if you're going to hunt just for one specific weapon in one specific place, you're now going to be chasing it because of the possibilities and the combinations you can get out of it randomly, of course. So I was like just messing with the farming and whatnot, to the point that this just made it a lot more satisfying than it has ever been in the past in previous Borderlands games. Now, on the side of characters, another aspect that I found to be really interesting is that this is a franchise that consistently pulls off, successfully at that, having multiple playable classes, or in this case Vault Hunters, that feel distinct and unique from one another. Not just in terms of abilities, but in terms of voice acting, the way they speak, the way they react to things, the way they also approach stuff in the main story that's happening, and also the jokes that they crack and whatnot. So overall, this has even made some of the characters that maybe previously were not my favorites to really become my favorites, just because of the way they react to things. Specifically, Amon in my case was definitely one of them. It felt like he would be my least favorite character, but after playing with him a little bit more, it feels like he's definitely going to be one of my favorites, and part of that is the voice acting too. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. And another aspect about it is that it consistently feels like Borderlands can pull off multiple playable protagonists, also feeling distinct from one another in terms of gameplay. So all of them, all of the possible builds and the build diversity makes it enticing to try them all out. And the good news is that the game facilitates and even encourages you to try out different alts. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but let's just say there's actually a way in which you can fast track other characters once you completed the main campaign with at least one of them. So you're gonna see that in the full game once that happens. In the meantime, I did appreciate the more serious tone of the main campaign. The main story over here felt refreshing. It's not like the main antagonist is the most charismatic or coolest. There were definitely much better examples in previous Borderlands games, especially Borderlands 2. Not that every antagonist has to be super charismatic or somebody you want to root for or just somebody you want to see more of. Some of them can also be just unidimensional, just a big bad guy, high stakes, want to take them down so you can reach your true end goal. But in this case, I kind of wish that because of the story context, we have pretty much a whole planet that's nothing short of fully subdued and enslaved, both physically and mentally, and the stakes being so high. I just think that they had the right premise to create a really interesting and compelling villain, a multifaceted one, but as it stands, it felt pretty unidimensional. So at the end of the day, it was just another stepping stone for us to reach our true end goal. Plus a few other twists that you can see from a mile away. But overall, I will still say that it's miles ahead better than those incessant streamer kids we had as end story villains in Borderlands 3, so that's already a huge step up just because of it. Also, what I think contributes to making the story a lot better than it normally is the fact that it's quite interconnected with the previous Borderlands entries. Borderlands 3 in fact suffered from not introducing enough of the past characters in enough meaningful ways, while 4 actually changes that quite a bit, and you will see them heavily involved. There are quite a few that will make a comeback here. I'm not gonna spoil anything once again, but I just love the fact that it further explores those personalities and even some of the time skips that have happened in between the games, both from the main and some of the side narrative. You're going to have a lot of involvement from them. And speaking of that, on the side content side, this is another one that I'm going to praise. Not that it changes the formula in any meaningful way, so it's pretty much going to be the same open world content, unlock stuff, get more stuff out of it, like pretty much every open world game out there, but strangely it functions so well for Borderlands 4 that I cannot see the franchise going back to the more linear game design. And the main reason for that is because literally everything feels useful in here. Even the side missions, the most obscure side mission can lead to like a boss fight that may drop some really cool dedicated drops to the point that you may want to seek out everything. That's definitely been the case for me. And all of these side missions, auger mines, bunkers, and drill sites, and other assortments of activities too will eventually lead to a boss fight, and you really want to unlock these eventually, not just because of possibly dedicated drops, but also because they will be part of the weekly endgame rotation. I don't want to spoil much about it at the current time, but yeah, just go and unlock everything. You may not know when the next rotation is exactly on a boss that you haven't unlocked yet. And speaking of that, other side objectives also count to something, especially your SDUs, which is basically your carrying capacity, both in terms of backpack capacity, bank, lost loot machine, and ammo count. All of these silos, safe houses, and everything with this icon will count towards it and will give you a meaningful progression to go towards. It feels like this is one of the better open worlds that were put together so that they can all work for one single objective, making your character stronger or giving them access to something cool or something rewarding. In this case, I do have, however, some downsides to talk about it, which also brings us to the not so positive aspects of the game. There were a few shortcomings over here that some of which are not excusable in this day and age, so I'm going to continue with the open world for now. I'm only going to give it like a B or maybe a B plus at best, because there are two changes that I was kind of hoping we get at this stage. One is that the Echo Navigator is really unreliable. You're going to oftentimes get routes that make no sense. Like, for example, just pass through this mountain that cannot be even passed through, so it just doesn't make any sense. It gives you a straight line to a location that cannot be reached in that way. So overall, it felt unreliable about like 40% of the time. And another problem is that I spent so much in the map menu looking at the route because of a lack of a mini map here. Either make the echolocator better and not have any cooldown on it, or give us a mini map, but it's just annoying to stay in the menus in this day and age. Now, previously I mentioned that the melee combat didn't completely hit the mark for me, and it's not like full-blown negative. Let me just be super clear. Melee combat actually feels more satisfying than I anticipated, and there's actually a strong build you can possibly reach around the full melee, at least for a character like Rafa. It's just that because of the way the game works, there are a few things that stay in the way of fully enjoying that, like how you do in the case of gunplay. So I identified the two main reasons for that, and what prevents me having full enjoyment of it is one, the way the camera acts during melee combat, and B, the way your character auto-tracks to a target when trying to hit them with melee, because your attacks in melee actually have an auto track that brings you closer to targets. It makes it easier for you to connect to them, but that assumes they are stationary. If they tend to move around a lot, or especially if they float or fly, that's going to give you some pretty confusing moments like these right here, where your camera acts up weirdly or your character connects in weird ways. And that is besides the fact that if you happen to be in an arena that has points where you can fall off the map, that's going to be pretty difficult to control. So it's not the same level of finesse you can achieve with gunplay, and I will even go ahead and say there are entire boss encounters that I'm not even sure how we're going to even tackle with a melee build, just because of some of those involved mechanics. It's not that you cannot achieve a strong build with full melee, you definitely can, and it can be pretty much almost immortal. It's just that some of your enjoyment will not have the same level of finesse as the first person perspective has. Another one that's also kind of a negative is that there are still useless legendaries and legendaries that feel gimmicky. That's not a problem in and of itself, it's just that there were quite a few of them. Maybe not as bad as Borderlands 3 because of the new licensing part system, but that's still RNG dependent. So if you don't get it with the parts that would make it even stronger, you're still going to have a gimmicky, useless legendary that's getting exceeded even by maybe a rare, especially since rares can have a lot more licensed parts on them by default compared to legendaries. So overall, I think there are many dedicated loot spots that are kind of worthless just because of this whole idea. But in terms of even bigger downsides, probably the biggest was definitely performance for me. Now, admittedly, it seems that the game got 2 or 3 patches in the time that I played the game for the past like week and a half, and the performance did get better, but it's because I also reached the end game. So I'm gonna explain to you how the performance manifested. It seems that you get big FPS drops whenever you find a save point. So in this case, as you get close to it and the game auto saves you at that location, it causes a major lag spike. And it seems to only trigger the first time you encounter it. So once you discover the whole map and go through everything, the second time or on your other characters, you're not going to have this problem any longer. Maybe there's some kind of caching system that banks some kind of files when all of this triggers. I don't really know how that functions behind the scenes, but it felt dreadful initially going into new regions. It really felt like it was ruining my experience. So that has been kind of fixed with a recent patch. I think that for the past couple of days, I no longer had that issue, but I still don't see a way in which you can play this game at a respectable level without a beefy PC. You're going to need a pretty solid one. So I still have my worries about performance at the end of the day. But overall, I will have to say that this is a pretty solid game for me. This is a much better improvement compared to Borderlands. So at the end of the day, I'm just going to give it the positives and the negatives right here. So positives, gameplay feels insanely fun. Licensing part system is pretty much genius. Characters felt distinct, both narratively and build-wise. And the side content felt like, for the most part, it was definitely worth it. In terms of the downsides, like I mentioned, melee builds may suffer because of the game design. Some of the legendaries may still feel gimmicky. The open world could use a revamp a little bit in terms of navigation, or at least the minimap. And biggest downside, performance still plagues the game. So overall, I think this would have been a solid 9 out of 10 for me if it weren't for some of these issues. That is why once they get fixed, it's definitely going to get that mark from me. But in the meantime, I'm going to give it an 8.7. I'm going to subtract a few points just because of some of these issues. They can be fleshed out, so hopefully that's going to happen in the near future. This is pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.